Hi and welcome to another episode of the Getting Things Done podcast from Vital Learning. I am Morten and I am here as always with my good friend and colleague Lars Henriksen. Привет, Lars!
Привет, Morten. Good to see you as always, and as always, good to be with our listeners and viewers out there. We always start off with a quick reminder of the purpose of this podcast, which is to help you learn GTD or become even better GTDers. I'm sure today's episode will help you with that. If you're new to GTD, we always recommend you go back and listen to episodes 1 through 6 to get an introduction to the basics of GTD, the 5 steps. Today's episode number is number 114 of this podcast, and today's episode is about the new book, Team Getting Things Done with Others.
Indeed, it's an interview episode where you have interviewed David Allen and Ed Lamont, the two authors of the book. And I am very curious to hear what they have to say about the new book. So just to set things straight, it's called Team Getting Things Done with Others. That's the correct title, isn't it? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Are you ready to roll the interview?
Let's do it.
Yeah, okay. Roll.
And now, our special guest.
It is my great pleasure to welcome not just one, but two guests on the podcast today, which I think is a first for us. Both Morten and I have known you for many years, but in my preparation for this interview, I, of course, Googled you both. And according to Google, we have with us today one author and one American author. Not sure about the distinction between the two, but I'm very happy, first of all, to say hi to author Ed Lamont. Ed, how are you doing today?
Wonderful. That would be a Canadian author. Perhaps I should add that into the description.
We need to fix that with Google.
Yeah. I'm very well. I'm a little bit tired. I've just come back from a week in the bush learning bushcraft skills and interestingly some very interesting teaming stuff as well. So I'm well, very satisfied if slightly tired.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here. And a hello to the American author, David Allen. How are you doing, David?
Hi, Lars. I'm absolutely fine. Thank you very much. It's a little rainy and a little chilly here in Amsterdam at the moment. And I have a dog trying to get on my lap. One of the hazards of animal husbandry. But anyway, I'm fine. So thank you, and thanks for the invitation. Delighted to be here.
No.
Always happy to chat about this stuff. Yay.
Yeah, great. And that's a different team, I guess. You and the dogs as well. So you are both co-authors of the new book, Team Getting Things Done with Others, which came out in May. David, of course, wrote the book Getting Things Done, and Ed, you've worked with GTD professionally for many, many years, training, coaching, consulting, co-founded GTD, Next Action Associates in Great Britain and Next Action Partners in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, if I remember correctly.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time here with us. I can imagine there are a lot of activities also with the book. I know that especially for you, David, because you just did a big speech and some workshops in Denmark at a conference called President's Summit in Denmark just a few weeks ago, which was a lot of fun for me to attend. So happy that you're taking the time to talk to us a bit in this episode, where I hope we can touch on a bit about the book itself, of course, some of the principles in the book, and in the end also some practical tips for our listeners to try out. So I will dive in right away with my first question, which of course is, how did the book come up? How did you decide to write it?
Well,
we were... Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole gestation period, I think, prior to us actually having a conversation about it. But the conversation was really about just noticing that there was a bit of a gap in the GTD canon, if you like, insofar as we were both working for many years with individuals and largely successfully with individuals, teaching them the skills of personal productivity. And then noticing that very often they were having to go back from a seminar where they were all lit up about possibilities into teams and structures that really didn't work for them. And it wasn't that they couldn't practice GTD; they could, and the best of them did. But even they were kind of just playing self-defense a lot of the time, instead of being able to get on with the bigger things that would be possible if their team was a better structure. And the realization that kind of came after the conversation was that you can't fix those things with just more and better individual productivity. There's something that needs to happen at a different level for that to happen. So there was that noticing of the gap, and then also just kind of a inherent frustration about not being able to address more of the problems that people were experiencing in their daily work. And then the decision was to work on the team structure as opposed to the organizational thing, because that's such a big beast that it may be the stuff of a next book, who knows? But it's for now, we just thought we can probably do something fairly effectively and allow so that teams can do quickly if we work at the team level.
Great. Yeah, I noted that as well in the interview you did with Todd and Robert's podcast, where you were talking about teaching GTD to people, but sending them back into teams where, that self-defense description that really stuck with me. So now the book is out, and I'm curious to hear your expectations for it, and perhaps allow me to start with mine. I think this is the book that many GTDers out there have been waiting for. They have their GTD practice in place, helping them to succeed in their organization, or at least keep their head above water. But now with the teamwork or the team book, they have a framework to think about when it comes to collaboration with others. So this is now my chance as a GTDer out there to, influence and help my colleagues with the best practices from GTD on a team level. And I think this will introduce many more people to GTD, and I think perhaps inspire them to become GTDers, which is of course great for everyone out there. What are your expectations now that I've set mine really high? What are your expectations for the book and its effects out there?
Over to you, David.
I'll make a stab at this. Much like when I wrote Getting Things Done, I had no idea how popular it was going to be. I just had to get it out of my head. I had to capture, 25 years of my career and everything I'd learned about it, and just stick it in a manual as I got good coaching that I should do that. I had no idea. But again, I think the combination of high aspiration and no expectation is kind of, where I am with all of the work that I do. It's like, yeah, that'd be cool if that happened and whatever. And, I'm okay if it's not. I just think this needs to get out into the world. And maybe, 50 years from now, somebody picks up the book from, some time capsule or whatever, and reads it and goes, oh my God, how cool is that? So at least it's out there as a methodology. So that's kind of mine, at age 78 in my career right now. It's not like I need this book to really work in order to keep my career going. But I'm excited that we did this, and that it was a big, as Ed mentioned, it was a big gap that needed to be filled. So just be, kind of insanely curious about what the uptake is going to be. So, no idea.
Yeah, I'm with David. High hopes, low expectations. Just because expectations tend to lead to frustrations and resentment, so I'm not keen on those. But would love for it to obviously to sell well. It's been an investment of several years of research and effort. And it would be great. And we actually wrote this stuff up, but we wrote a lot of the book using the principles of the book, sometimes consciously, sometimes just because it felt like the right thing to do. And then we realized, we just did the thing that we're proposing people do. We did write up, our vision for it. And one of them was that this book would expand the field really for people to practice GTD on an individual level, but also to start to shift teams. And that's why we defined teams so broadly, because it would be a shame for only people working in large organizations to get GTD and get the team a la GTD. So we defined teams quite broadly, so we could catch non-conventional teams and help them as well.
And I think also what's fascinating is, for, I don't know, 100,000 years or more, people have gotten things done with other people. And yet there hasn't been a manual about how that really works on a universal scale. Meaning 100 years from now, 10 years ago, whatever, what really worked when things worked to get things done. And we all get things done with other people. I don't care how, much of a hermit in the woods, doing your own art or writing your own book or whatever. You're still going to need somebody to express it, to get it out there, to cooperate in order to make it happen. And yet nobody's really, at least the best we could see, nobody ever written a real manual about this that wasn't, tied specifically to a kind of a team, like in a pharmaceutical company or in an aerospace company, where you have projects that have a team template about how we do this or whatever. But years ago, I did a lot of, I struggled around to find out, okay, who's got good models about how do you work together as a team in terms of project management, in terms of other kinds of things. And frankly, nobody had it. Nobody had figured that out. And still, maybe somebody else had, but I think Ed and I did a pretty good job of nailing it down.
Yeah.
In terms of high hopes on sales, someone sent me a text. I don't know if you know this, David, but someone sent me a text over the weekend, which was to say that we are currently number 2 on the hot releases in Amazon. So I would prefer to be number 1. After a week after release, I'm okay with number 2.
Wow! Congratulations. Nice.
Yeah. And so we were just reviewed in the Wall Street Journal, by the way, by a woman, and she ended it with saying, "This is a really good book, not a great book." And in a way, I mean, wow, I wonder why she said that. Well, it's obviously a critic's spin. They try to, make themselves unique or say something, provocative about whatever they're critiquing. But I don't think Getting Things Done was ever seen as a great book. I think it was seen as a good book. And I think good is probably better than great. There are a lot of great books out there, and they have a very short lifespan. And so I think good is probably as good a recommendation for this book as anything. It's like a good manual. That's really good. It's not a great manual for Word or for Teams or for whatever, but it's a good one. Yay! So who knows?
Yeah. One thing that I was curious about as you spoke about this now is how people will find this book, pick it up, perhaps differently from the Getting Things Done book, because Getting Things Done is a lot about personal productivity, and this is more on a team level. And at least in my work over the years with GTD, sometimes it can be more challenging to pick up the book that is about you as opposed to the book that is what can we do as a team, because then it's not about you personally, it's about the team instead. I don't know if you've thought about this or any reflections on that.
Well, I mean, I think go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, we acknowledge that. Come on, if you're a soccer player, if you're a football team, you need individuals who have great capabilities. But you then also, that's not enough. You need to know how to work together as a team. in terms of your mechanics of how we practice, how we work together, how we engage together, how we strategize together. And that isn't handled at the individual level. But you need the individuals who have the capability of doing that. If you don't, then you can have the best strategy in the world, but things are going to fall through the cracks. And that's not going to work. So you need both. That's why we tried to address this, in sort of the multiple ways that you need the combination of high-performing individuals who know how to then play together in a high-performing way.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we sort of wrote the book with the initial idea of, hey, we're going to get this out to people who are already practicing GT and want to do it, do it better at a team level. I suspect a lot of the people who pick the book up will not necessarily be those people. Like we really wanted it to be something that would be accessible to people who knew nothing about GTD. I hope we were successful with that. And I think you're right, Lars. I think that a lot of people will buy this book because they're so frustrated about their team. And they will want to get their team fixed. And what they might find in that process is that, when you're pointing, classically, if you're pointing one finger at the team, you've got at least 3 fingers pointing back at you. And that they'll go, oh, I need to work on my personal stuff as well. But I think you're right. A lot of people are going to be experiencing frustration at the team level that they're not experiencing about their own productivity, because they're not really aware of what's possible in the domain of personal productivity. So they think they're doing really well, and they're frustrated with their team members. Hopefully the book will give them that, but also some sense that, hey, I need to do some work myself.
Yeah. So we've already touched
Lars, one of the things I think we're running up against is people are in their comfort zone with how their teams are working and not working. I think a lot of teams don't realize how suboptimal their functioning is. And I think we tried to address that as well, but that's one of the things certainly Ed and I have noticed, is that a lot of teams are just, oh, well, that's the way we've done it. We always have Monday meetings, and always 3 or 4 people don't show up, and always people have 2 or 3 digital devices in front of them that have nothing to do with the meeting. That's just the way things have been. And we're still okay. We're still functioning. We're still a company. We're still a team in a way. And most people don't realize what they're missing because of that.
Absolutely, and I can certainly recognize that it's been one of the fun things to notice over the years, or fun might be the wrong word, interesting things to notice over the years working with different clients is what are the standards for meetings, like you say. When do people show up? Do they show up 5 minutes before and have their agenda ready, or do we start 5-10 minutes past the hour to then go through whoever speaks first or opens their mouth first, right? And people just, for the most part, just recognize, that's just how it is. But yeah, for many people, things can get better. Like you said, hopefully the book can help with that. So moving into the contents of the book, we've already touched a bit on it now, but how would you sort of describe the book overall? Perhaps highlighting a favorite part, if you have one.
Ed?
Well, I would call it a great book, but I'll live with good, which is so much better than all the other possibilities, really. And I think that there's a few parts of the book that we structured it in. There's 3 chunks to it. One is kind of like what's the field of play. What's the current situation? What are the problems that teams are experiencing? And what is a team? That's kind of section 1. Section 2, we get into the kind of the extension of the original principles of GTD into the team environment. And then at the end, we're looking at, if you're managing a team, leading and managing a team, here are some things you might want to think hard about. Leadership, delegation, and being able to prioritize or say no consistently enough that the team has some hope of not just sinking in a mire of overwhelm. So that's how we structured it. And There's lots of pieces of the book for me. I guess there's a few personal favorites. One would be the working standards chapter. I think it's a place where I think we were able to add significantly to the discussion on organizational culture and what it is and how to change it in a fairly granular way without huge corporate initiatives. You can make it fairly. I think you can make changes quite quickly to team culture. Again, organizational culture, that's a different beast, but I think at the level of the team, you can get really, really important stuff done very quickly. If there is any will at all to improve performance. I also, I think the other chapter that's extremely important is the one on saying no, because there really is no way to go forwards and preserve the health and sanity of your team unless someone, indeed, ideally everyone on the team, being able to say no to stakeholders in service of getting the important stuff done. And then the idea that underpins it all is in that first section in the intro, is the idea of healthy high performance. And that is behind basically everything we wrote, was how do you achieve healthy high performance? Not just high performance without health, not just health without performance, but how do you do them both? Those I think are, my personal favorites. I could go on and on and on, but if you forced me, then those are the things I would highlight.
David, any favorites?
I think to echo Ed, actually, a little bit about the standards and the fact that, over the years, over the last 40 plus years with my company, actually sitting down, Catherine and I, my wife and I, were on a plane flying to Chile, actually meeting with some people that we wanted to engage with. And we said, we've just now sort of created our new company. What would bother us if it didn't happen? We sort of assume we both had the same kind of standards about how we do things and what's important to us and what matters. We said, but I don't think everybody else necessarily shares that, or at least knows that about us. And since they're going to consider us the founders of whatever this thing is, probably a good idea to let them know what would bother us and what would turn us on in terms of standards. And I think a lot of teams have never gone to that level of subtlety and perhaps importance and motivation about, hey, let's work together as a team so we all grow together. Even if the team gets canceled because of other changes that go on, we learn something about each other and about ourselves and how to work together just in the process. So things like that, that's pretty subtle stuff in terms of a standard. So I think we tried to address that at least a little bit, that there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for teams to motivate themselves better and turn themselves on better and have a richer kind of environment as opposed to being driven by latest and loudest and and whatever teams are driven by.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. Certainly the standards part is interesting, and also the saying no part. I really appreciate that we have that also in the level 1 seminar, that this is actually a skill that's focused on and was highlighted in my most recent seminars. It's so interesting to show up for a seminar called Getting Things Done, and we actually focus on that and actually focus on many more things as opposed to just what people perceive often to be just be more productive, produce more. I really appreciate that. One of the things that I have noticed myself, so you were kind enough to share the book with us earlier this year, and we read through it. And one of the things that I find myself referring back to frequently was the delegation part. So looking at my projects, looking at my next actions, looking at my areas of focus with the lens of what can only I do. I don't know, David, I'm sure this has come up many times over the years in coaching others, perhaps, or where have you seen this most?
Yeah, well, a mentor of mine taught me, some of the key elements of getting things done, which was basically get stuff out of your head and then take the stuff you got out of your head and make decisions. What is it? Is it actionable stuff in it? So if you can finish in 2 minutes, do it. If you can't finish in 2 minutes, are you the right person to do this? Can you hand it off? Not do you like to, are you comfortable with, but can you hand this off? And so I got trained in that 40 years ago. And this is pre-digital, we just had a paper-based form template that if somebody needed to hand it off, they would just write out a memo, put it in their out basket, and they'd go out. And they were amazed. The next day, stuff would come back. Done. The needle moved forward. Wow. Who'd have thought? But if it was only trying to, kind of coax people into, wait a minute, can someone else do this? Maybe not as well as you, but can someone else handle this? Because you got enough on your plate. And so I learned that years ago. Yeah.
And the only do what only you can do was just something that came out of coaching and seminars that I was doing around the turn of the century. And it became clear that anybody who was in a leadership position had way too much to do. And there was always a kind of an emotional pull back to what they were good at. And they were avoiding doing the things that they were less comfortable with. And there was a whole host of things that the team needs them to do that nobody else can do on the team. No one else has the juice, the relationships, the kind of the stakeholder influence that the leader has. And so, kind of only do what only you can do. But if you think about it, it's not just for leaders, right? It's for everybody, not as a rule, but it's a useful filter to just lay that over whatever you're looking at and ask the question.
Yeah, I've seen that so many times over the years in the seminars where this delegation question coming up in the clarifying flow really has made a big difference for people. And perhaps we need it even more in Denmark than in other places, because I noticed my iPhone auto-correcting delegation to relegation when I was making notes for this. I don't know, perhaps we need this even more than other countries.
It's an interesting one, because I think if we move a little bit away from just the principle of it and we go to the emotions of it, I think that as individuals living in a somewhat chaotic environment, right? It can feel that way when we're out in the world, right? This environment is less like it's very, very chaotic and sometimes very unfair. And so we all, I think there is a real desire for control of our environment. And so, we end up sort of bending ourselves out of shape to get control. And one of the things about delegation is that you have to give up control. And that's one of the reasons that I think people struggle with it so much, is that they have their own standard and they don't feel like their standard will be met. And that they're going to lose control over, whatever quality or customer satisfaction if they don't do it themselves. But what they don't realize is that they basically will put the brakes, they will slam the brakes on their own career if they do not learn to delegate very early on.
Yeah.
And
very good point.
And then it comes back, Lars, as you know, back to people's personal capabilities of managing their own work. So, if an executive is not taking notes, if they're not keeping an agenda list for things they need to talk to people about, if they're not keeping a waiting for list of things they're waiting on from other people, then they tend to then react to things blowing up instead of showing up, as opposed to conscious, constructive conversations. Hey, Jose, look, tell me what, I'm giving you these 4 things. How are you doing on that? Do you need some help? Do we need to take something off your plate to make that work? I mean, these are very healthy, mature kind of discussions to have, but, that's missing if the individuals themselves don't have their own personal act together.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen that from a practical perspective as well. You know, being a GTDer out there as a project manager in an IT project, I can absolutely recognize that. Moving on to some practical tips as well. So like I said, I really think this book is an opportunity for the GTDers out there to try to share more best practices from GTD. And we want, of course, to give some practical tips as well to the listeners and viewers out there. And one thing that I keep finding myself coming back to this thinking also in seminars is this collaboration, the thinking behind the uppercase and lowercase projects that you mentioned. I don't know, perhaps you can elaborate on that one, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, I'd love to say it was, a child of my mind or our minds. It was actually, I mean, most of the book, let's be really clear, is based on interviews with, it's our experience, obviously, but we also worked with about 65 GTD leaders, but by and large, they were mostly GTD practitioners who were also leaders, some of whom were leading quite large structures that we're calling still teams. And it was one of our clients actually who said that they had found this way to distinguish between the big P projects and small p projects as a way of working out where does this need to go, so that the individuals know what they're doing, but the team knows what it has on. So the big P is kind of the classic something that might need Prince 2 kind of project, a big team project. Whereas the small p projects were things that belonged in individuals' GTD systems. And they just found this is a really easy way to have conversations about projects that you wouldn't want to try and do all of the team projects at the personal project definition level, right? You'd end up with just a massive, massive list. So it was just easier to have a definition which allows for a manageable list at the team level, but still keeps everyone focused while managing the GTD project definition style down at the individual level.
Yeah. One other thing that I noted, and I see that we have lost the connection to David. There were some concerns about the internet connectivity going up and down with some work being done on the cables there. So hopefully he will find his way back. One other question that I had for you, Ed, was this work with teams, some practical examples of this. You mentioned that this comes from a lot of interviews. I'm sure there must be many stories that have, that you've heard over the years on how teams have implemented this and what kind of impact it has had. I don't know if there's any specific example that comes to mind for this.
Well, I mean, there are wonderful stories of teams using this stuff, and let's be clear, both pre any work with us or with this material, because again, if it's a principles-based approach, then people who were doing it at a world-class level, we're just kind of revealing to them what they're already doing. We didn't have to invent this stuff. We just needed to go out and see, well, what's actually working. But there's just wonderful stories. The easy ones are kind of around purpose and vision. I love that stuff. I always have, from my first read of Covey back in the late 80s, that idea of vision. And there's so many amazing stories about vision. I've included, one or two in the book, about, one of my friends and clients who, set a vision for a $1 billion business globally, from actually quite a small base. Like they were a long, long way away from that. And they managed to do it because they set a very clear vision. They communicated it very enthusiastically. They worked on persuasion. They held the vision even in difficult times. Those stories I love, but also the really prosaic stuff. like what happens on a team when they agree how they're going to do meetings, what happens on a team when they agree how they're going to do communication with each other. I mean, and there, one of the stories in the book is just massive increase in employee satisfaction in the employee engagement survey in the organization when they made these decisions about how they were going to communicate, what tools they were going to use, what tools they weren't going to use, and how they were going to use the tools they decided to use. That just created a massive increase in their satisfaction. Wonderful.
Yeah, I had that. I saw that tool discussion showing up now in a recent seminar as well. They were using software application for a shared overview of projects, but was it? It didn't really give the overview, and was it the right channel for the different discussion topics that were going on? Was it for an overview? Was it for a next action level? It was very, there were some clarifications needed to make that work much more helpful for them. What about the? I suppose if you are a manager and you pick up the book, you can read through it, and I'm sure some parts of the book will resonate more, and we need this more than others, so they might be able to pick that up and start at the appropriate level. But what if you're on a team? Any tips for anyone out there who are on a team wishing for some aspects of the book, more GTD on a team level? Any suggestions on where they could start?
Well, I mean, I think you would pick up the book, and hopefully, in reading it, you would become inspired, not like some kind of otherworldly experience, but just inspired by the possibility of a new way of working on your team. And I'm guessing, if I was picking this up for the first time, looking at it as a team member, I would probably be drawn more to, because that's the nature of being human, drawn more to the things that we're not getting right than the ones that we are getting right. But it should give you some language and a framework to begin to talk about what's going wrong on the team, and maybe where to start, where we should start, where is the high leverage spot for us to start. So we'll get maximum benefit for the least amount of effort. And I think there are things that you could do really quickly. And this is, again, one of the examples from the book is, foxhole buddies don't need to have a lot of committee meetings about what they're going to do next, right? They just kind of look at each other and go, this is the way we want to do it. Let's do it this way. I think the problems of doing things differently as a team inside of a larger structure that's not doing them that way are probably overestimated. I mean, I don't think anybody really cares as long as you get your work done, and you don't have to publicize the fact that you're going to do things differently on your team. I don't think it's worth, going 3 levels up to find out if it's okay to decide that you're only going to work with, do your meetings at least in a certain way, right? You may need to monitor channels that you as a team are not going to use, but I still think that would cut down the amount of time you spent in the other channels if your team chooses to do things in a certain way. So there's lots of places that you could start. You could start with, okay, as a team, we're going to start to say no more. We need to have agreements about, who's saying yes to what, whether we need to check with each other before we say yes as individuals to things, because that might just make it impossible for us collectively to get our important work done.
Yeah, great reflections. Thanks, Ed. Any sort of last tips or, recommendations for the listeners, viewers out there? What should we have touched on or shared that we haven't already covered?
No, great interview. I mean, I think the thing I would love, and both David and I were very keen on this idea of healthy high performance, because the consequences of our society's obsession with performance and actually kind of mono performance in the financial domain, right? Like we're not measuring performance on most other metrics, actually, right? We're obsessed with financial performance when it's abundantly clear that, you know, financial success is useful to a certain extent. It's also very necessary for human happiness, but it's not everything. And certainly for a lot of the world now, it's clear that just piling up more stuff is not going to make anybody any happier. So I think we need to step away a little bit and work out, you know, what is health, mental, physical, spiritual, and social health. And how do we want to measure those things so that we actually have a way of moving forward consistently towards, you know, human happiness and fulfillment, as opposed to just piling up more stuff while we incinerate our environment. That's just not a great way forwards.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ed. That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to David. We'll send our thanks via email instead to him. It was great talking to you both. And again, thank you so much, both of you, for writing the book. I don't know if I can speak for all GTDers out there, but I'm almost sure I can. Thank you so much for writing this book. This really is the manual for GTDers out there to navigate by in our work with others, and perhaps help share GTD with others around them. So thank you so much.
It means a lot that people like you think it's a good book.
It's a great book. Thank you, Ed.
And that was a good interview. Sorry that we had David leaving us. Unfortunately, that was not in his hands, but we lost him because of faulty internet. He warned us that that might happen. So, but thank you for attending, David. What was your takeaways, Lars, from this interview?
Just so much good stuff. Like I say in the interview, that really have high hopes, high expectations for this book. So many good things in there, and really looking forward to hearing, you know,
and it was a great book, not a good book. It
was a great book.
It is a great
Absolutely.
book.
It's a great book. We need someone to go out there and make some reviews on Amazon and different places to make sure that people know it's a great book.
Yeah.
No, but I don't know where to start really, because there are so many things that people can pick up on. I like the ideas that we spoke about, how, of course, you know, obviously if you have a team, if you manage a team, then you can pick this up and read through it and figure out, so where would be a good place to start for me? But I also think, you know, Ed covered it nicely, saying, so if I'm just on a team, what can I do? How can I go in and make some changes to make this work more efficiently? And lastly, you know, especially the last words from Ed on measurements and you know, high performance, how does that actually work? I really like that perspective.
Me too. So our suggestion to you, the listener, is go buy the book. It's available on well-assorted bookstores everywhere. Amazon sells it. It also Audible has the audiobook. So if you want to listen to that instead, you can actually go to audible.com and create a free account for 1 credit, and then when you downloaded the book, you can then unsubscribe from that credit. It will not cost you anything. You will get the audiobook for free. Isn't that cool? Okay. Famous last words from Lars. Will you take us out?
I will. Just a quick note that I really, you know, I really hope this was a helpful episode for people out there. And, you know, what I'm really curious to hear now when it comes to the book is, so what will the impact be? What will the effect be out there? So if you read through the book, try some of the things out in your team. If you have any stories, experiences, how will that work for you? We would love to share that in the podcast. So be sure to let us know. I've asked this of, all the people in Denmark that I know have the book. I'll ask this to all of our listeners and viewers out there to also share this with us, because I would really love to hear. So how does this actually work? What worked well? What was more of a challenge? Let us know. Podcast at VitalLearning.eu. Then also, before we wrap up, perhaps we should take the time to wish everyone a great summer, because this will be our last episode before our summer break, and we'll be back in August, if I remember correctly, Morten.
That sounds very, very correct. And you're having a discussion where Lars is thinking maybe we should just do this every month, while you're doing it now bi-weekly on the regular schedule. If you agree with Lars, send us a message. If you disagree with Lars, send us a message at podcast@VitalLearning.eu. So if you want to keep it bi-weekly, let us know.
That is true. And then the usual wrap-up is normally to point you towards gtdsummercamp.com. Well, when this episode is out, we have actually just held the GTD Summer Camp. I'm sure it was great. We had a lot of fun the night people there, no doubt. I can look into the future. That's just how it works with GTD. So we'll, of course, there will be a summer camp next year as well. So be sure to keep out, or be on the lookout for when we start advertising this sometime after the summer in the later this year. We also always wrap up with a quick reminder to head on over to VitalLearning.eu, because that is where you will find the companies in Norway, Denmark, all across the Nordics, plus with more information about the GTD seminars, the coaching, everything that we do. So VitalLearning.eu is the place to go. And if you're outside the Nordics, cruciallearning.com is a good place to go to find your local partners.
Yes, and we've decided to ask you, the listener, if you are having value from this podcast and would like to connect with Lars or me, or both of us preferably, at LinkedIn, you can. So our suggestion to you is that you follow us on LinkedIn or connect with us. If you decide to connect, please make a mention in the invitation that you, for example, GTD podcast is enough. Then we understand that you are not a spammer who want to connect with us, but you have a legitimate interest in getting things done. So feel free to connect or follow us. We do, both Lars and me, we share things that is mainly getting things done, and hopefully that will be beneficial for you.
Indeed. There will be links in the show notes.
It will be links in the show notes. And well, until next time, after summer, enjoy summer and stay safe and stay productive. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.